I would love to welcome you all. And we'll start with Ida, as you're the first. Ida Fabricius Brun, you are the CEO of Alkohol och Samfund. Where are you reporting in from, and which of these stereotypes did you find most correct?
I'm reporting in from Copenhagen, from the office now. Well, I think nothing really surprised me much with the with these stereotypes. Perhaps that we don't think that we're the most happy countries in the world, because well.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting because there is something called the World Happiness Report. Mm-hmm. And the Nordic countries have been top 10 for many years. So I read somewhere that like the Danes are the happiest people in the world because they know how to enjoy life.
But perhaps kind of... if you asked us in July, I think it would look differently. Right now it's January.
Definitely.
Outside.
That's a very good point. A very good point. Thank you so much. We'll move on to Maria, who is the executive director of EHIT. Welcome. Where are you, and which stereotype do you agree the most with?
Thank you, Sarah, and good day to all of you. I'm from, or sitting now in Helsinki at my office, and nice to be here. Well, I would say, even though I wear also black and white at the moment, like Sarah, but I have to choose the one that Nordics are the happiest people in the world, because I know that's not only a stereotype, but that's also true. And Finland has been most happiest nation in the world in the World Happiness Report, I think 4 years in a row or something like that. So I would go for that one.
What a great place to live. Back to you, Ragnhild. Which of these stereotypes did you find most interesting or agree with?
Well, looking at the panel, I would say wearing muted colors, at least today or in the winter time. So I'm sitting here at our offices of Avotil, and it's quite gray and snowy outside. So I think both our clothes and the city right now is quite black and white, muted colors.
We're kind of blending in. Maybe that's what it is. We actually just want to blend into whatever we have around us. Fantastic. So happy to have you here. And you are all experts in some way in this area of alcohol because of where you work, which is why we're so interested to hear your perspectives from each and every country. So we are going to dive into the report and the results that we have. Before we do so, David, it would be great to just have a little bit of background to what we're actually talking about. We've done this Nordic survey. So since 2010, IQ has done this yearly survey on attitudes to alcohol in Sweden. Why have we done this? Would you like to tell us a little bit?
Yeah, we've done this study, as you said, since 2010. You look at the attitudes towards binge drinking, like heavy consumption during a short period of time, and to drinking during weekdays, and drinking in certain occasions, like around children, at work, in traffic, and we do this to give us a snapshot of the Swedish alcohol culture, and it also gives us a possibility to identify which target groups we should is most relevant for our interventions, and we can also see how the trends and how the attitudes changes over time.
Yeah.
And the study is like built by, the respondents get statements in the survey, and the answers in the scale from completely wrong to completely right, and from the results of that we get the attitudes on these different aspects that we will look into today.
Yeah, and that's super good that you mentioned, because you will be seeing some numbers where it'll be percentage numbers, and this is based on those different the scale of from wrong to right, which the respondents have answered. Great. Okay, but and this time we've decided to broaden the scope, because before we just did Sweden, but now we've also included what we're going to refer to the Nordic countries. Now we are aware of that Iceland is also included in that concept of Nordic, but just for this talk, we're just going to be talking about Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland. So hopefully no Icelandic participants. If we have any, we'll take any offense that we didn't include you this time, but hopefully that could be something to look at another time. So Nordics will be those countries here. So we broadened it. Why did we do that, David?
Well, we've done the studies in 2010, and we would like to try something new, look at different perspectives, and we're curious to see how close we are in the Nordic countries, at least on the attitudes to alcohol. So it was really interesting to see how similar we are and how much we live up to the stereotypes that we have. So it's a new twist on the attitudes, on the Swedes' attitudes on alcohol. So it will be interesting to see the results.
Definitely interesting. I'm very curious to see if we live up to our stereotypes. I know I have a few. So let's dive into that. The first area that we're going to talk about is binge drinking. Here we have the results from the survey. Attitudes to binge drinking. Most liberal are those who have the lowest number. So the higher the value, the more restrictive. So we see that Sweden has the highest value, followed by Norway, and Denmark and Finland are sharing the lowest score here. Okay, so Ida and Maria, Denmark and Finland seem to be the most liberal. Are you surprised about these results? No? Does anyone? Okay, give me your thoughts, Ida.
No, I'm not at all surprised for several reasons. I think that if we look at the Danish statistics, we actually see that quite a high percentage of our population binge drink regularly. I think we have 35% of the total population, and it gets much higher if you look at the young age groups. So I'm not surprised at all. Also, I'm not surprised because we have very sort of liberal legislation around alcohol, alcohol consumption, alcohol purchase, all those things, and not that it's directly connected to binge drinking, but at least it makes binge drinking quite possible. And also with our advertising legislation and stuff like that, we don't have very many restrictions on that. So I think that it's that might be the reason. Yeah,
definitely. And there's so many interesting things to pick up there. Partially the youth, but we'll be coming back to that, and also some on the legislation. Maria, what are your thoughts here? Finland being equally liberal as Denmark in this survey.
Yeah, this is really interesting to see such a comparison, but I think Denmark and Finland are a bit different when you see like alcohol policies or the society. But what is similar is this, that getting drunk is a big part of our alcohol culture also. So, and there was a global drug survey last year where Finns were the least sorry for getting drunk. So this is also like similar, like this question. So I think it's not that surprising. No. And I also wonder, maybe this is also a reflection of our culture overall. I think that Finnish culture is quite individual centered. So maybe there is something like everybody minds their own business, and we are not that socially disapproving when people get drunk, so they are not that kind of social code.
That's really interesting.
So maybe,
because I'd say that Swedes we have kind of a similar, we're very individualistic in Sweden. That's a tricky word to say, but we'll get to that soon, David. But looking at Norway, Ragnhild, you're usually seen very alike to Sweden, but here we're quite far apart from each other. Are you surprised about the difference in our attitudes?
A bit surprised. I'm not surprised that Norwegians enjoy our binge drinking. We know that, but I think Norwegians also tend to compare ourselves more to Swedes than we do to Danes and Finns also when it comes to drinking. And nowadays we often read in Norwegian newspapers and talk about our new continental habits, meaning that we like to enjoy one glass of wine to our dinner, and I think our image is that Swedes are more continental in their habits as well. So that might be why we think that we are more like Swedes than Finns and Danes. But we know I might not be that surprised that we enjoy our binge drinking.
Interesting. And we'll get back to, I think, the whole continental vibe a little bit later when we look at what we think about drinking on weekdays. But David, when we look at these numbers, it's pretty clear that Swedes are the most restrictive out of our 4 countries. I mean, why? Do you have any idea?
No, well, I would say that the other panelists has been touching the reasons. Maybe I think legislation is one bit. We have quite strict regulations on the alcohol area. We have the state-owned monopoly, the Systembolaget, retails alcohol, and I also think we have quite a big public acceptance for the regulations.
Yeah.
So maybe that reflects the attitudes also.
Yeah. Yeah, and even if we are the most restrictive here, what we can see, at least in the study that we've done over time, is that Swedes are actually becoming more liberal in our views. So maybe a little bit along the lines that Ragnhild was on, we're starting to get a bit more continental maybe. Or what would you say? Are we becoming more like our neighbors, David?
Well, at least concerning the attitudes, that's a fact. You can see that in the studies. But even if our attitudes shift, the consumption has changed a bit. We've been less binge orientated, but the total consumption have not. It has actually gone down over the last 15 years or so. So even we get more liberal in the attitudes, but we don't seem to drink more. So it's a complex area.
A more continental mindset, maybe in that case. Then to the rest of you, have you seen any similar kind of trend in over the past few years, or what's happened with consumption in your countries over the past decade? What would you say? I'll give the word to Ragnhild.
Thank you. Yeah, we have seen a steady increase from like 1990 approximately, and 2008 was the top year. Yeah. But after that, it's more been almost the same, right? Until 2020, the first Corona year, where our statistics shows a quite big increase. But this might be because of the way the statistic is, because many Norwegians buy quite a lot of alcohol from our neighboring countries, and suddenly that wasn't a possibility. So the sale of alcohol inside the Norwegian borders has gone up quite a lot.
Yeah, interesting, and we will be coming back to that as well. There's so many questions here. Okay, and in Denmark, Ida, what's it look like? Have you seen any similar trends, up or down?
Yeah, very similar. We've had a decline during the past 10 years. But also we saw a small increase in 2020, but it's because we do it in sales numbers, in retail sales. So probably what we haven't been able to drink in restaurants and bars and stuff like that, we've bought that from the stores, and also we haven't been able to go to our neighboring countries, mostly down south, to get our alcohol. So that's probably why. But we've had a decline during the past 10 years in alcohol consumption.
Interesting. And Maria, What's it been like in Finland?
Well, it's very, very similar to others. So in the past 15 years, the alcohol consumption has been decreasing in Finland also. I think this change has happened after year 2007. So that was the highest ever consumption year in the history. And like you said, Corona has also affected, has decreased alcohol consumption also in Finland, and these restrictions and traveling restrictions and opening hours. So, but there is a small group of people who have used alcohol more during Corona time. And these are often the same people who have had higher consumption before Corona also. So the polarization can be seen.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Ida, if I go back to you, and it sounds positive that the alcohol consumption has decreased, but if we look specifically, I mean, there's a pretty global trend about youth drinking less, but it doesn't really seem like that's happening in Denmark. Do you have any ideas on why?
Well, it has happened in Denmark. In the past 20 years, we've had a decline, but what we saw at the latest research on this in regards to the SPAT, we actually saw a slight increase in especially 15-year-old boys' consumption. And I think that's worrying for several reasons, obviously. And also something that we need to take very seriously, even though it's just a small increase. I think that it's a good it's a wake-up call of some sort, that the positive development that we've been through the past 20 years have sort of stopped.
So definitely something to follow. We'll talk more about kids and alcohol, but now that I pointed out Denmark, I feel like I should definitely put the limelight on some of the other countries. So Ragnhild, we saw in the results something that was quite funny, which is that the Norwegians are the least negative to hangovers. It reminds me of what Maria said as well, about not being so sad about being drunk. Just under every third Norwegian thinks that it's okay to have a hangover, to feel bad the next day. So compared to then every fifth Swede. How come? Why do you have this view?
I think because we think it's the natural consequence of binge drinking. It's the price you have to pay to have that sort of alcohol consumption. So we are fully aware of hangovers as a consequence, and we accept it. It's not shameful. Maybe it just shows you invested in the night before, that you're invested in the party, that you are accepting the consequence that is a hangover. So I just think it's a natural consequence of the way we drink.
So Norwegians are pretty rational, I could say, in that case.
And I think many of the results actually show, and we know from other statistics, that we know the consequences of drinking, also the bad ones. So we have quite a reflected view on alcohol.
Super interesting. Okay, so Maria, if I go over to you instead, then I'm thinking this is also kind of a view of what you said. It's not so shameful, Ida, that it's to get drunk or to get feel bad the next day. And Maria, if we go on the same track, it seems kind of more okay getting drunk in public in Finland too. For example, every fourth Finn thinks it's pretty acceptable to get drunk while at a dinner out at a restaurant. What would you say? Is it like more about the dinner culture, or is this that it's pretty acceptable to get drunk in public in Finland?
Yes, well, I thought about this, and I think that in this particular question about going out for a dinner and getting drunk, I think that in Finland, going out for a dinner is a special occasion. It's not something we do very often in Finland. It's maybe a bit like a festive occasion. And at the same time, alcohol has become very much part of celebration in Finland. So it's something involved in these kinds of special occasions. that are not everyday life. So I think this has something to do with that, like the celebration culture and alcohol being involved in that one.
So clearly you like to celebrate and do it out in the public in that case in Finland. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at a different aspect, which definitely goes against a stereotype that I had personally. And that is drinking on weekdays. We touched upon it a little bit earlier. I was surprised to see that Denmark actually doesn't have the most liberal attitude when it comes to drinking on weekdays. Feel free to have reactions as well. But Ida, I want to ask you, because Denmark is actually the second most restrictive here. So has the culture changed? Or is this a stereotype that we just let linger on in the other Nordic countries?
No, I actually think this is an expression for the fact that the culture has not changed, that we in Denmark, as we talked about with the binge drinking, that we sort of save all of our consumption to the weekends and then we really drink. So to put it in a sort of to pinpoint it. And I think that I've thought about it, why it might be, but I think that the culture that when we drink, we really drink, and that we're not that we're not shameful about getting drunk. Actually, for a lot of people in Denmark, getting drunk is sort of the goal or the target of a nice party. So I think that this whole sort of acceptance of getting drunk and the binge drinking culture is pretty obvious here. Also, I don't know, I was thinking that our health authorities have, as in probably all other countries, a sort of a maximum unit recommendation per week. And I don't know if Danish people perhaps are just sort of saving all of their consumption to the weekends, perhaps, because we have this party culture that's obviously most common among very young people, but I think that we take it with us into adulthood, many of us do.
Yeah. So keeping the units for, special occasions, so they make sure not to use them all at once.
Yes, but then you use all of them on Friday and Saturday, and I think that we have a task in communicating that perhaps it would be a better idea to sort of spread it out a bit more.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's interesting, because when we look at this, and especially when we divide it up into different age groups, we do actually see that the Danish pensioners are more or less as liberal as the Danish youth. So I should clarify that that's under 29 that we're talking about youth, and over 60 for the pensioners. What happened here? So like, how come the Danish pensioners are so liberal in their views? Would you say?
Well, that's a good question. If we look again at the statistics on who drinks most, we actually see that the very young drink a lot, and then it sort of declines when you get into sort of your 30s, your 40s, but then when you reach 55 plus, then you start drinking a lot again. So we have something happens here, and we discussed it here in the office when we saw the survey, and I'm not sure that we have the complete answer, but I think that some of it might be that the generation who are 55 plus have been one of the most wealthy generations, or the first generation that's had a lot of money to buy alcohol, and also the prices on alcohol have been very low. And I think that we still have this idea, if we look at studies that have been made among elderly people, I think that we still have, all of us in Denmark have sort of an attitude that when you get old, then you need to enjoy life, and part of enjoying life is that you're allowed to get your whatever you like to drink. So I think that might be the case, but I'm not quite sure if that's the entire answer.
No, and I'm sure there's enough reasons, as many as there are reasons, there's as many people, of course, but it's interesting to look at the general idea. I'm just going to remind the attendees also to please use the chat if you have questions that you want to give the panel, and I will try to be your voice for those questions. So if we look at this graph again, Maja, Finland is the most liberal here. And we see that, we don't see that in this graph, but we also saw in the results that it's primarily the Finnish men that are the most liberal to drinking on weekdays. So what do you think has influenced your view on this?
Okay, so it's interesting because like we heard just a moment ago, also in Finland, we don't drink that much alcohol during weekdays. Drinking happens mainly far away from weekdays, like weekends or in celebration or holidays and occasions like that. But I think maybe this has something to do with the overall attitudes towards drinking that are liberal, as we saw. And why Finnish men are more liberal? Well, I know that studies show that in Finland, men drink more on weekdays than women. Okay. So maybe this explains the gender differences in this one.
That they just do it more often and therefore it feels more acceptable.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. We will get back to gender differences as well later on. We looked a bit more specifically because Vardagsindex, this index is made up of 5 different questions. And if we look a little bit at some of these questions, we can see that over half of the Finns are positive to drinking a glass or 2 just to wind down during a weekday. Norwegians are actually almost as positive to this, and Danes are less liberal. So kind of the way that we're seeing this graph. What are your thoughts on this? That it's pretty okay to wind down with a glass or 2 during the week? I'll give the word to Maja or to Ragnhild.
Well, I can start because we thought about this here in Ehud. Of course, we don't have explanation, but one possible explanation to this one could be that, as you know, Finns like to go to sauna. And in Finland, sauna and beer are very much connected. So it's quite typical to go to sauna on a weekday and have 1 sauna beer. So that's quite traditional in Finland. So I think there might be something to do with our habits of relaxing in sauna and having that 1 sauna beer.
Interesting. So the association to relaxing in sauna. I love that there's a concept of a sauna beer as well.
Yes, that is a concept of sauna beer, yes.
Fantastic. Okay, interesting. And if we look at the graph again here, or actually also at the question we were just talking about, that to relax, you drink a glass of wine or beer. Oh yeah, sorry, Ragnhild, did you want to comment as well as Norwegians? Do you have any similar association to relaxing?
Yeah, I don't think I can blame the sauna for the Norwegians here, but we think it's a bit surprising. But there might be an acceptance in the Norwegian population to use alcohol as a mean to calm down or stress less, or it's a way to reward ourselves, like, oh, it's been a stressful day at work, and then we can take a glass of wine. And I think maybe also we believe that is kind of a continental way of drinking. So I think we might feel a bit posh sipping a glass of wine after work. So I think, but it is a bit worrying if add this on top of the binge drinking in the weekends, because statistics don't show that we drink less during weekends. No. So that is a bit worrying.
So we're mixing the best of both, I guess, in some sense, that it's continental / the Nordic styled binging on weekends. Interesting. David, Sweden is, surprise, surprise, most restrictive, both in this graph, but also about the question of drinking to wind down. Fewer in Sweden think that it's right than that it's wrong. So do we have stronger social norms in Sweden? Like, what keeps us in check as much here?
Well, it's hard to tell, but we seems to be a bit more worried about how we judge ourselves and others, and we also have a strong tradition to drink in weekends, even if that's in a bit of a transition as well. So I'm not sure the reasons really, but I think we also try to be a bit more continental, but still have the weekend drinking, and so it's we'll see. Time will tell, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely will. We can't really let go of our traditions, it sounds like, so we're still a bit stuck there. But we are in very special times, because on that note, we are living in a new type of normal now during the pandemic, and have been. And Ragnhild, you already mentioned a little bit about how the consumption has kind of shifted over the past year. We've also seen that it's impacted our attitudes, and we see that in the survey. And I will turn to you, Ragnhild, just to lift Norway in this aspect, that 32%, almost every third, has said that it's become more acceptable to drink during weekdays during the pandemic. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the restrictions have influenced our drinking habits. In Norway, we have had longer periods where restaurants and bars have not been allowed to serve alcohol at all, or just until 11 o'clock at evening. And a lot of the Norwegian debate during the pandemic has been about the skjenkestopp, not the ban on alcohol. It's been debated a lot. Yeah. So I think that because statistics show that we haven't changed a lot in how much we drink, but drinking has moved into the home.
Right.
And we are worried that we will continue with the corona habits.
Yeah.
In addition to our existing habits. And we are also worried that people with a problematic relation to alcohol now is not detected by colleagues or friends, because we drink more at home and we drink more alone. Yeah. Shows the statistics in Norway. Yeah.
Very interesting, and it'll be interesting to follow. I know that we've had similar discussions in Sweden, but David, what would you say we don't have the same shift in attitude to that it's more acceptable in Sweden, not as many. What would you say, how has the pandemic affected our consumption in Sweden?
Well, I feel like we have had the same discussion as in Norway, but when we look at the surveys that's been done on the consumption during the pandemic, we can see that the majority have not changed their consumption. Like 70% have not changed their consumption, and 20% have actually decreased their consumption, primarily young adults. I think they have a more social way to drink. Yeah. They don't drink just to get the taste of it and have a nice wine. It's more like a social event. So it's more natural. If you can't be in a social way and drink, you don't drink at all. And we can see that it's only 10% that answer that they have increased their consumption during the pandemic.
Okay, so maybe a little bit along the polarization trend there as well, as Maria was talking about.
Yeah,
fewer doing that. Time is flying. I see also that we have a question that is leading us into the next area that we're going to dive into, which is kids and alcohol. So it's perfect that we now also got a question on that theme. I think we'll start with that question and see that Eivind has asked that in Norway, the overall consumption is somewhat higher the last decades. But it is old people that drink more and young people drink less, and their consumption is down by 33% the last 20 years. So that tells him that the binge drinking generation might be dying out. Do you agree, Ragnhild? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's correct. It's the youngest. It's
Right.
Actually the people that are not really allowed to drink. They are drinking less. So it's before the legal age of drinking. So we don't see the same when people come up to their 20s. But hopefully, hopefully this will also affect the consumption later on in life.
Yeah.
But it's definitely the decrease is clearest among the youngest people.
Yeah. Fantastic. We see similar results here in Sweden as well. It's never really been this low in the youngest age groups. So it's a new generation who's a lot more aware, it seems. Okay, so if we dive into kids and alcohol, this is an issue that unites the Nordic countries, and I'd say almost, because Denmark does differ on this aspect, while Finland, Norway, and Sweden are very united in our view of being restrictive about drinking around kids, or I should say getting drunk around kids. Denmark seems to be a little bit more liberal. So Ida, the Danes are definitely without a doubt the most liberal around getting drunk around kids. 69% of the Danes think that it is wrong. This should be compared with those who are the most restrictive in this case, which is the Norwegians, who 91% say that it's wrong. How come we see this difference, do you think?
It was actually one of the questions or the answers that surprised me the most, because I thought that we would be more restricted. I think we've had quite a lot of public debate on children growing up in families with alcohol problems and the harsh consequences this has for them. So I would have thought that it was different, but then I thought about it and talked to some people, and why is this? And actually, come to think about it, we haven't had the public debate about partying or being at social events where kids are present. And I think that we have this distinction between if you have an alcohol problem that's really bad for children, or if you just sort of drink every once in a while at a party and it's okay and we all do this. So I think that it's sort of like the big discussion about how we socialize. And also we don't have in Denmark, it's very few places that you actually have rules about alcohol at social events, in schools or in daycare facilities or at sporting events and stuff like that, where kids are present. If you meet with in your children's class after school to have a dinner together with parents and children, many would bring wine or beer, and no one would have a rule saying you can't do this because you're on school premises. So I think that we need this debate, and I also think that we need some framework or some rules or legislation that would perhaps get this debate started. And I think in some municipalities in Denmark they've done it, but it's not everywhere. And I think that that we need to take a step towards a greater awareness about this.
Yeah, this is so interesting. I think maybe at least some of the Swedish participants are thinking, what? That you don't have rules and regulations around where kids, areas which are focused on kids like school and sports, so that there wouldn't be any legislation. But Ragnhild, you're the most, or you, not you, but the Norwegians are the most restrictive. Why is this? Have you had this kind of public debate? Or what's the reason behind this?
Yes, but we also have a long history of so-called non-alcohol zones, which I think is what Ida is referring to, that debate isn't quite there in Denmark. So we have a strict alcohol policy, and alcohol-free zones are also a political tool, which there is almost no debate about because kind of everyone agrees. And the most important alcohol-free zones are probably those where children are present. So for example, a debate about serving alcohol at sporting events often arises, but the argument that children are present is often what prevents beer from being served at football matches. So it's kind of like, but there are children there, so then there shouldn't be any alcohol served.
Yeah.
And I also believe that it might be a result of our tradition of binge drinking, because the aim is intoxication. And if the aim is being drunk, it's quite easy to see that children shouldn't be present.
Yeah.
So that might also be a reason behind it. Yeah.
It's a very clear standpoint. I think Per also sent Pat in the attendee said that it could be also an attitude of that they should learn to drink and in a safe environment at home. This is referring to the Danish view. Just adding that to the conversation. Ida, I can see that you have your hand up. I'm just gonna also give you a question while I hand you the word. Because we can see that Danes are liberal about serving youth in their own family under the age of 18 as well. So this is interesting, but maybe we should also throw in the disclaimer that you do actually have a different age limit in Denmark to buying alcohol. Do you think this is also something that adds to the attitude, being a bit more liberal?
Yeah, I think that was why I raised my hand. Pier's chat message is totally correct, that we have a saying or a myth in Denmark that children should learn to drink at home. And I think that our age limit is very much a driver for this, at least when it starts, because we have an age limit of 16 for buying alcohol yourself in retail. And I think that signals to parents everywhere that, well, when you're 16, you need to learn how to hold your drink. And I think that's a very common belief in Danish families. And I think many of us have been brought up that way. I've been brought up that way too. My parents served me alcohol when I was 15 or 16. Don't you want to try this? And I think that's very slowly changing. I think that the Danish health authorities, and we do it as well, try to communicate very much about this, that it's not a good idea. But I think that it's a very sort of ingrained part of being a family in Denmark.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely a part of the culture there. But on the same theme, another thing that's connected most of us Nordic countries is drinking, or rather not drinking, while being pregnant, where we see that all of the countries agree that it is more wrong than it is right. And yet again, though, I have to turn to you, Ida, that there is also a more liberal view in Denmark, where almost 1 in 10 think that it's actually okay to drink while you're pregnant. What are your thoughts here? How much discussion has there been on this subject?
There has been a lot of discussion, I think, years back, actually. And I think this is where we are most restrictive. And actually, if you ask, I saw a piece of research a couple of years ago, or a poll where you ask people what's an acceptable excuse for not drinking alcohol. And there actually weren't many other than if you were pregnant or if you had to drive. So I think that we have had that discussion. However, it doesn't really surprise me that we still have these numbers, because you are still being served alcohol when you're pregnant. It's not uncommon that you're asked when you're pregnant. I've been pregnant twice, and I've been asked both times, even though I was very visibly pregnant, if I wanted a glass of wine at a social occasion. And I think that's just a part of the way that we meet, that we can't meet without alcohol. You don't want to leave anybody out, that alcohol is part of the community, or the part of being together, and you kind of want to include everybody, even though
even if maybe it isn't super appropriate when pregnant. We're now just looking at binge drinking. And of these, we can say that the attitudes were the most similar, if I don't miscalculate here, in Denmark and in Norway. I think if we're going to look at these numbers, we can just see quite generally, the lower the value, the more liberal. And it's pretty obvious that men are definitely more liberal than women, no matter which country we're talking about. And I'd say that is a pretty global phenomenon. I'll throw out the question to everyone and you can pick it up, whoever wants to, but would you say this is a reflection of gender norms and maybe that men have a little bit more possibility to drink, more liberties to drink than women? And why is that in that case?
Well, I can refer to a study we've done on this subject in Sweden, that we can see that in young adults, they say that there is different expectations on men and women. Men have a more, they're expected to be able to drink a lot and to cope with it. It's more macho attitude, sort of. And women, on the other hand, should not drink too much. They should have control and avoid risks. So this is maybe, this reflects the results, I would say.
Yeah. And just what you're saying now, Pat is also commenting on that there's possibly a connection to the risk of sexual abuse. And exactly that is what you're mentioning in the study that we had earlier from IQ, that women try to decrease the possible risk.
Exactly.
Which is also interesting, though, if you put it through the fact that men then are expected to drink more and to be able to handle it. With that said, that's a norm that's pretty heavy to bear as men as well, that, you know, to be a part of it, you need to kind of live up to this expectation. So it's definitely a norm that's hard for that side as well, in this to bear. Do you, the rest of you, Maja and Ragnhild and Ida, any thoughts on why we see this difference, or any additional comments to what David said?
Well, I also agree that there are something to do with gender norms generally. Maybe women also have traditionally role as a caregivers and taking care of the children, for example. So maybe there's this responsibility also that women bear, and it shows in these attitudes maybe also, and attitudes change slowly.
Yeah.
So this may be also changing and going more close to each other, these gender norms.
Yeah, which we do actually see, at least in Sweden over time, that the difference between men and women is decreasing in the attitudes over time.
In the attitudes and also in behavior. So consumption is also going closer.
Absolutely.
The difference is smaller.
Yeah, that is completely right. Okay, so we are closing in on the last 2 minutes of this talk, and I would love to hear just a sum up from you all. What do you take with you? What are the key insights that you take with you from today's talk? And Ragnhild, I will let you start.
Thank you. Thank you for the survey and the debate. I think that drinking like the Nordics is quite complex and not quite as we assumed. I'm taking that with me.
Thank you. That was a very concise takeaway. What do you say, Ida? What's your takeaway?
What I thought most about when I read the results were that it's very clear to me that our alcohol policies reflects our attitudes and our also our consumption of alcohol. The more restrictive, the less you drink, and the more restrictive your attitudes are. So that was what I really took with me, and that's also why the results aren't that surprising when we sort of look differently than the rest of you. And then from this talk, I've really thought that it's clear that traditions and culture are aspects that are hard to fight, that in the way we look at alcohol.
Yeah, thank you. David, what are your takeaways?
Well, it's been a really interesting discussion, and I think that these questions can't be discussed enough. And I think maybe by comparing yourself to others, you get a lot of new perspectives. truths that you thought you had might be challenged. So
yeah,
it was really interesting.
Thank you. And Maria, I will let you sum up your takeaways.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that, as we can see, we cannot do direct conclusions about attitudes just by looking at people's behavior or policies in the society or consumption. So I think this is really good reminder that we should study and talk about attitudes and cultures, and also take these into consideration when we are planning our actions. So
fantastic. Great takeaways from all of you. And it's now 12 o'clock, so it's time to wrap this up. And I would love to thank all of you panelists so much for this very interesting talk. It's definitely been a pleasure to be a part of this and listening to your great ideas. I would like to say to all the attendees that you can get the full report on iq.se, and Senna will also be pasting in the link in the chat so you can click directly to it. There's also fact sheets in the respective languages, Danish, Finnish, and Norwegian. And there's also an English summary. So you'll find everything at iq.se.